Thanks everybody for joining us today. Happy New Year. This is our kind of first legislative meeting, if you will, for the new year, and something that traditionally we do through coffees or town halls with an opportunity to talk about what we see forthcoming in the upcoming session, but also maybe more important is to hear from you, particularly where we're at the point of submitting bills, which we can do through, I believe, the third week of February now this year. So if there's concepts that are important to you, we have the full delegation on. So regardless of who represents you, we're happy to have those conversations go forward. So just to kick it off, I am Laura Devlin, a state representative for the 134th district. We do have our full delegation here, and I'll be introducing them and turning it over for an opportunity for them all to speak with you as well. In this upcoming session, I'm really looking forward to again participating on the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee, also serving on the Transportation Bonding Committee, the Transportation Committee, the Education Committee, and the Legislative Management Committee. We've just spent some time today with my caucus. I think all of the caucuses are doing this, having discussions about what we can anticipate and how things are going to work in this, remote world that we're still working in. So this coming Wednesday is opening day for the legislative session. We'll be doing things very differently. For the House members, we'll take our roll call in our offices and then walk over to the Capitol outside, where everybody will be sworn in for the next 2-year term. And then we'll go back to our offices to vote on the joint rules. So that will establish how public hearings will be held, how our committees will be held in this Zoom world that we are living in. COVID is definitely still, top priority in terms of health and safety of our residents. And for me, that extends to also things that we're looking at in terms of hopefully being able to secure additional funding for certain populations that have really struggled through this time. So for domestic violence, which we have seen an increase to ensure that supports are there, for addiction, which also has continued to be a growing issue through this pandemic. And for education as well, for our kids, and particularly those with special ed and with distance learning requirements. So those are all some things. We've also continued to see in our communities an increase in recurring vehicle thefts with little consequence at this point for those offenders. So we're hoping we can do something there to have some consequences that may be able to stem that from moving forward. Importantly as well is support for our businesses. The Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund is what pays out for unemployment claims, but it is paid back by taxes on our businesses. So we're really hoping that our COVID support, both from the federal government and from the state, can help stem that tide. So those are some of the things that we're certainly looking forward. There are some big issues that we'll be tackling this session. And with that, let me turn it over to Senator Hwang, who can also introduce himself and talk about what's forthcoming. I will warn you, Senator Hwang did tell us he'll have to leave a little bit early. So Tony, take it away.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks for organizing this, and want to wish everybody a happy and healthy new year, one that everybody's so very anxiously looking forward to, and I wish everybody the best. And we do start session on Wednesday, but the main issue that's always been in the forefront for the past year has been COVID, and I just wanted to take a second and recognize that the state of Connecticut just had over 6,000 deaths due to COVID, and it is an incredible tragedy. It is one that I know is on the forefront of everything that we'll be doing, not only as legislators, but municipal and and town bodies and just local communities. So our thoughts to all those lives that have been impacted. But Laura's right. This is going to be an interesting session. It's a COVID world that we live in. I will be the ranking leader on 3 interesting committees, one of which is planning and development that I'll work with the current chair, which is Representative McCarthy Vahey. Looking forward to that. We'll be looking at municipal impact and maybe some issues in regards to land use and zoning. But there are many other issues related to municipalities. I think it's going to be a very, very interesting and productive session. The second committee that I'll be ranking leader, Senate Minority Leader on is in the area of insurance. And we've already been engaged in many discussions in regards to the public option of health insurance in light of these COVID times and the health risks. That is a very poignant and important issue. The third committee that I'll be the ranking leader on is in the area of public health. We will be reviewing anything related to COVID, dealing with our healthcare providers, hospitals, but we will also sit on that committee that will review the governor's executive order extension powers. So we'll be busy. And the fourth committee that I'm on is also in the finance committee that looks over bonding and revenue. And I'm significantly concerned about how the current deficit calculated for the upcoming year to be over $4 billion and this economic devastation that has been caused by COVID and the challenges of our state's dynamic and ecosystem, that it's going to impact our municipalities. And I'm really concerned about how COVID and the economic fallout will impact not only our state, but also our municipalities and also our nonprofits and important entities and those that are in our safety net. So we have a lot of work ahead of us. And Laura mentioned that I'll have to leave early because we're gonna, in the Senate, review rules for how we will govern and manage committees. I think one of the important things that I will reiterate in that meeting later on today is the fact that how do we ensure transparency? How do we ensure that input and feedback and involvement of the public that we represent have a say in the laws that we make? So it is one of the critical parts that doesn't always get the attention, but the rules that govern how we allow people to have input and impact and how we are making laws that impact them is going to be absolutely critical. So we'll stay up to date, and I want to thank everybody for joining in and participating. I'm excited to work, and we will have a difficult road ahead of us, and I'm eager to work together to solve problems for the state of Connecticut.
Tony, thank you. Hey, just for everybody really quick, if you do have questions, just through the chat, send a chat message to the host, and then we'll be able to get those answered as we move ahead. But let me turn it over to Cristin McCarthy Vahey.
Thank you so much, Representative Devlin, and my thanks to you also for for putting this together for all of us. And thanks to everyone who's here. Together with my colleagues, we're very excited to be able to engage and have the opportunity to connect with you. So my role this year in the legislature, which I'm so privileged and grateful to continue and have the opportunity to continue to serve the people of Fairfield, I will serve as the co-chair, the House chair of the Planning and Development Committee. I will remain on transportation. It's the committee that I've been on since I started at the legislature, and I have remained, this will be my 4th term on that committee, and it's, I say often, my first love. And then I will also be serving on government administration and elections. COVID has defined this past number of months, and I often say 2020, the irony of 2020 being the year that it was, the term we often use for clarity of vision. And I think what has happened with both with COVID and the other pandemic of racism that we have faced with what happened last summer and the events following have really helped us to understand just how important it is that we focus on issues of healthcare and economic equality and opportunity, and to make sure that we are helping support the basic needs and of our residents and neighbors: food, shelter, and certainly education as well. And I know I'm no longer serving on that committee. I know others will be, but within the Government Administration and Elections Committee, I hope to continue to focus on an issue that I have been talking about since I moved here from a state that had no excuse absentee ballots, which is to expand our ability to vote both early and with no excuse absentee ballots, our ability to apply online for absentee ballots, and our ability to restore the rights of voting for those who lost them due to involvement in the criminal justice system. Those are some of the issues within that committee. Within transportation, we really have to focus on safety. Here in Fairfield, we have been impacted by one of our beloved community leaders being seriously injured in a pedestrian accident. And this year, or last year, I should say, 2020 was at the very end of the year, I know, on track to be the deadliest in Connecticut in a decade, or in almost a decade. So I'm very interested in pursuing some of those bicycle and pedestrian safety, but those other safety laws, things like backseat seatbelts, all of those things that continue to go on even as we face COVID. And then in planning and development, there's a lot of backlog work to do. I often say that it's a very wonky type of committee. There are a lot of municipal issues. There's a broad variety of issues. For example, passing the state's plan of conservation and development will be one of the things that we need to look at when we look at how we plan for our future sustainably, how we plan for our future practically, how we plan for our future with economic development and issues around equity in mind. All of those things will be part of what we do. I do want to underscore too what Senator Hwang said about the rules and how we operate. I will say as a chair, finding already that it's challenging in this environment, and we will be relying on you, and we will be working as hard as possible to make sure that as many channels of communication are open and available so that people's voices can be heard. And to that end too, there will be a lot of conversations that we have in committees. And I know certainly as a chair, I will be opening the gateway for conversations to happen on a broad range of issues, some of which I'll be strongly in support of and some of which I may not be myself, but want to continue to be able to open up some of those conversations so that together we can plan for the future. And the last thing I'll say, I know I'm talking maybe more than I should, which is I'm really interested in continuing to get information out about our vaccine distribution and availability. And I'm really looking forward to when it's my turn in line to going and getting that vaccine. Thanks so much, Rep. Devlin.
Cristin, great. Thank you so much for that update. And you're right about the pedestrian safety. That was stalled last session, like many things were. Some we might be happy about, some not so much. So it'll be interesting to see how we can move things forward. But let me turn it over to Rep-elect Jen Leeper, who Wednesday will be a big day for. So Jen, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Representative Devlin, and thanks for organizing this. I'm so excited to be a part of my first town hall. And I suspect I will not be the expert for many of the questions today, but I am excited to be a part of this and provide some priorities for the committees that I'm serving on. So I'll be on education, which is very exciting to me as that's my background. And some of the main priorities that I have in mind are prioritizing facility reimbursement, especially when we're thinking about the importance of air quality, which was already an important issue for many of our aging facilities, but has only grown in importance with COVID. And we know that it's a priority to try to get our kids back in school facilities for as much time as we possibly can. And to that end, also finding ways to prioritize our teachers for vaccine distribution so that they can feel safe in the classroom as we get more children in. And similarly, waiving testing this year. That is usually a federal requirement that we test our children every single year. And I'm hoping that with some pressure to the federal government, we can also get that waiver. And then I'll be serving on the Commerce Committee. And in the 132nd, we are so lucky to have many, many, many small businesses that I think are a big part of what makes Fairfield so charming. So I am excited to serve all of our small businesses. And some of the priorities in that committee will be workforce training and also aligning some of the work that happens in the education committee with our technical high schools with the future of our workforce needs. And I think that's really important work. And then also finding ways to hopefully work with the insurance committee on how we can get our businesses the business disruption insurance. I think after SARS, there was some language put in there exempting insurance companies for providing businesses with this type of insurance. So seeing if there's anything we can do to help our struggling businesses there. And then we are really lucky in this community to have so many women-owned small businesses. And there are a lot of resources and supports and grants available, and making sure we're doing everything that we can to ensure people are aware of all of those opportunities they could be taking advantage of, and then heightening them where we can. And then the third committee that I'll be serving on is aging, which I'm really excited about. And I know a major priority for many of the seniors in Fairfield and Southport is ensuring that Connecticut is a safe state for our seniors. And so there has been some initial legwork on an elder abuse registry. And really what it is right now is sort of a place where they have put together all of the sort of abuse registries together so that you can find them. And then in particular, as many folks may be wanting to keep their seniors and loved ones in a home setting rather than a congregate setting because of COVID, ensuring that if you're bringing in a health aide that you can find ways to do a background check. And I know that there is an initiative that's being prioritized to ensure that we're protecting seniors from age discrimination in the workplace. And then also overseeing our nursing homes and ensuring the safety and also the connection of our seniors that are there. And again, because of COVID, that is more important than ever. So thank you.
Great. I think as you all have had the opportunity to hear, collectively, we cover a wide swath of committees within the legislature, which is certainly an advantage for our community. Let me turn it now to some questions that have been coming in. And one of these is, what is the status of vaccine distribution for over age 75? Senator Hwang, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you are part of that committee going forward. Do you have any update in that regard? Oh, you're on mute. You just need to unmute.
Thank you. The vaccine distribution is a logistical undertaking that when you put into the context that this is the largest vaccination effort in the history of the United States. It's just overwhelming in regards to its scope and its importance. That being said, in Connecticut, we are doing a good job in regards to vaccinating our frontline healthcare workers, and we are implementing the process on nursing home support. But then there gets to be that kind of challenge as to where are the rest of the prioritization list and where are we in the distribution? And because the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine is a 2-dose vaccine, and for the purpose of contact tracing management, there is a logistical operation that is so vast from a standpoint of tracking who these people are, making sure that they're ready and available to take the next dosage in 10 days or 7 days, depending on which vaccine you get. The undertaking is overwhelming. And right now, because of the current executive order operation and because of the moving parts, we're not hearing a lot of information from the administration. We get a weekly Friday update of the Department of Public Health with our local health directors. And I want to give a big shout out to Sans Clary and his staff for all the incredible work that they've done during this COVID pandemic to ensure safety, public health safety in our community. but they have to be in constant communications in regards to how that's being distributed, who is on the next priority list. So it has been one of the questions that I've asked the administration and the Commissioner of Public Health and Josh Gabel, who's the Chief Operating Officer. What are the logistical execution from step 1, 2, 3, and all the way through, so that we can be able to manage expectations and ensure that people can have managed reasonable understanding of when they can be vaccinated. I will close by simply saying this: I believe in the effectiveness and the science of the vaccine, and I would encourage people that when it becomes available to you to take it and to develop the herd immunity that's necessary. But ultimately, the logistics and the operation is so complicated, and we need to be sure that there's transparency and that there's a prioritization list that fits within the needs and the values of the people in our community. One of which that I've been pushing for is the urgency to allow our students to get back into school. But I also want to ensure that our teachers and our staff and all our support staff workers, our bus drivers, that they have the accessibility to the vaccine so that they can be safe. So again, the details and the devil's in the details. And right now, beyond the very easy frontline healthcare workers and our urgently need of protection nursing home members, there's really not a lot of clarity. And I'm pushing for that to make sure that we don't develop a sense of confusion and then inconsistency in the delivery of that. So that is a extremely important question. And I know that's one that we'll be exploring very deeply in public health and demanding transparency and accountability from the administration. And I really am apologizing that I have to leave, because the rules debate that we're going to have in the Senate is critical, because it'll determine how we get these kind of information out to the public. So thank you very much for doing this. And I really apologize to my colleagues and the participants that that's the way it has been. And the overlap in the Zoom meetings has been quite remarkable. So I hope that helped answer, and I welcome the feedback of other people as well on that.
Senator, thank you. Cristin, you were raising your hand.
Yes, thank you. And Senator Hwang's right, those rules are important. I happen to participate in a call every other week that happens with the Commissioner of the Department of Public Health. And the last one that I was able to participate in was on December 23rd. And the anticipation is that 1A group, which is healthcare and first responders, that all of those folks should be receiving a vaccine by the end, their first dose by the end of January. And then the 1B group, which would include the individuals 75 plus and older and frontline essential workers, there's still a decision coming that will be advised by the Vaccine Advisory Committee that the governor has. And there's actually a subcommittee who takes the CDC framework and recommendations that have been distributed and sends that up to the commissioner. And it should be coming within the next week or two, that prioritization within that group. And then 1C, as we know, is ages 65 to 74, ages 16 to 74 with medical conditions, and then other essential workers. But how those get defined is still very much in conversation. So I think, you know, there are a lot of questions about vaccine distribution. I will say that I did have a conversation today with one of the members of the advisory committee, specifically to just let him know to pass along. And Josh Elliott, Rep. Josh Elliott, who's one of the representatives, a legislative member, that the need and interest in transparency and how that is going to work and what the thought process is in making the decision, I think is important for people to understand, because so many people have questions. I'm hearing you probably both Rep. Devlin and Rep. Leeper, and I know lots of other reps are getting questions from around the state. So as soon as we get the specifics on that, we'll get it out.
Yeah, thank you, Cristin. And another group that we are really pushing to try to be accelerated are our teachers, so that they can safely get back in the classroom. Our kids can get back in the classroom. There's just such a domino effect of things. I do want to give you a website. It is ct.gov/COVID vaccine /access. And that's where you can get updates in terms of sort of what the flow is, the sequence, and any news. And hopefully we will, they'll be able to move ahead and we will see more transparency in that regard as well. So let me check on, I think that answered several different questions in terms of the calendar of rollout and some other aspects. We have another question. Do you know how public hearings will work? So I was on a call just today regarding the rules, but Cristin is a chair of one of the committees. Do you want to speak to that?
Well, I mean, Rep. Devlin, you may have more up-to-date information. As you all heard, obviously Senator Hwang had to jump off. So what's happening is each caucus, so the House Republicans and the House Democrats and the Senate Republicans and the Senate Democrats all have to come to agreement on the rules. And then we vote on them, as Rep. Devlin said, on opening day, and they're still under consideration. But essentially, the hearings and our meetings will be via Zoom at this point. And, some of the specifics of that I think are still being ironed out. But I can tell you as a chair, certainly the goal is to allow as much public access as possible. It will be similar from my understanding as to what happened in the summer special sessions for the committees that had hearings, or we call them listening sessions because some of the things weren't in place within the rules. But that would allow folks to have online access, but if they did not have the ability to get online, would still be able to submit written testimony as has been done in the past. And that system will be, my understanding, and the last I heard, an online sign up, which will be more of a lottery system, which I have been advocating for in the Legislative Office Building for years, just so it's more fair to all members of the public. So Laura, if you have other specifics and know more from your conversation today, I'd love to hear too.
So certainly the lottery system is one, which I think is great. I've also advocated that public officials go after the public so that the public doesn't have to wait around. It's going to be interesting to see. On one hand, you could say that this Zoom world will give more access to people because, and you can always email testimony, and that has existed pre-COVID and pre our virtual world, and that will continue. But you could argue that it provides more access because anybody can log on. It doesn't require that you take a trip to Hartford, which, we live over an hour or so away from the Capitol. Some communities, it's quicker and easier to get to. You're not committed to spending all day, not knowing when you may or may not get called. On the other hand, there are people that don't have access to the internet. And so it could limit, but it'll be interesting to see. What I hope won't happen is that there would be, if there are controversial bills, that they are not grouped together, which would give ample time for sort of topics, if you will, to be really vetted by the public. And I think the other piece just might be that there will be a limit per day of the number of committees and hearings that will be going on, so that it's a little bit more manageable. And I don't mean that in terms of ones and twos, it may be more like 9 or 10. But Cristin's right, the way it works is, our caucuses do talk, they kind of agree on some initial frameworks, and then we all will vote. And usually it's a pretty unanimous, relatively unanimous vote. But so that's what we anticipate. Hearings do require a 5-day notice period. I would encourage you to also take down cga.ct.gov, and that website, there is a calendar, and it will lay out any public hearings or meetings that are scheduled, so you can kind of follow along. And I'm sure each of us also will be sharing that in our regular communications of what to anticipate coming up. We had a question that was sent in ahead of time that I want to throw out. This has a lot of aspects to it. And Cristin, this may seem to have your name on it. Jen, feel free to jump in. So let's see. Can you explain how I might support housing policies that will bring less government working for developers, less government mandates for large-scale developments, more government working with people to obtain sustainable, affordable housing, consolidating housing authority waitlists, establishing centralized contacts who act as realtors for qualified contacts, subsidies for down payments and rent to own options, and more government working with individual property owners and local builders and managers to develop missing middle density housing, ADUs/fourplexes. So that was a lot, but being our housing co-chair, I'm going to throw that one to you first.
Well, I thank you for that, Rep. Devlin, and I am the Planning and Development co-chair, and that is a distinction that I think is important.
My
for
mistake,
people.
thank you.
No, but you know what happens is a lot of, well, some history. Housing actually at one point in time was part of the Planning and Development Committee. And over time, it became a select committee and then a full standing committee of its own, because the housing issue in and of itself is certainly one of the biggest crises that we are facing as a result of COVID, the eviction and foreclosures that we are likely to see in 2021 without some very significant federal and state intervention is going to be potentially catastrophic. So that committee is a different committee. Planning and Development has the purview of a number of those issues. So it does make sense. And Rep. Devlin, I appreciate you sending that to me. I think one of the biggest things is, and I say this to representatives all the time, is to talk with chairs of those respective committees or legislators who sit on those committees. And because the first question was, how do I advocate? And so certainly it's looking at what we can do. And just the question alone made me smile. And I don't want to, I know the person who sent the question, and I so appreciate it and appreciate the work that you have done on this issue over many years, actually having been at many forums together. But it's a really complex issue, and it is everything from housing authorities, real estate, zoning laws, housing policies, funding, and there are so many ways to get at these issues. I think the biggest thing for me is that we have conversations that are solution focused and that get at what we can and can't do. And so certainly as legislators, we can pass any number of laws on any topic, but some of the things that were specific in that, I'll use ADUs, which are accessory dwelling units. Those, Fairfield Senior Advocates deserve a big shout out here locally. They were able to change our zoning locally to help encourage the development of accessory dwelling units or allow for them. That is a tool that we want to have in our toolbox. When it comes to housing policy and zoning, what we want is for communities to have tools in their toolboxes to be able to provide for what we need for economic development, for equality issues, for education, for safety. And ADUs, and forgive the alphabet soup, is one of the priority areas that I'm hoping that the Planning and Development Committee can work on together with the Housing Committee to help encourage that around the state. Now, more than ever, I think since the early part of the 1900s or maybe World War II time, more young people are living at home with their parents, over 50% as a result of COVID. So we know that's a great use. We have seniors who are property rich and don't have the liquidity. An accessory dwelling unit would offer them the opportunity to provide some income, and it would offer folks an ability to get into different communities. So that is definitely an area that's important and I think growing. I think the other advice I would give in terms of how to advocate and how to work on some of the issues is to connect with some of the regional groups here in Fairfield County. There are a number of folks having different conversations. Find out how you can work together, and I'm happy to make that connection with you. But there are a lot of issues that we have to face. Certainly, these are issues that bring up a lot of passion and sometimes a lot of angst here in the community. And so we want to be able to look at those. Putting on my co-chair hat, I want to look at those, certainly how they impact us here in Fairfield and what they mean for our state as the future. But to the questioner, I would love to talk with you more specifically. So please reach out so we can have more specific conversation.
Thank you, Cristin. We have another question from Fairfield Yabantu. There is a collective commitment to addressing and mitigating the issues surrounding COVID. There seems to be little to no acknowledgement of the crisis of racism and racial prejudice in policing, education, and housing. What, if anything, do our leaders intend to do to address this pressing issue? Cristin or Jen, if either of you have anything, what I would start with is that in the town of Fairfield, at least for our community, what I'm looking forward to is the report and the work of the Racial Equity and Justice Task Force. They were just commissioned or formalized near the end of last year. I think they've held a couple of meetings, certainly in November, December. I think their first meeting of 2021 is tomorrow, as a matter of fact. And at least from a local perspective, what I have been looking forward to, and I know our local leaders are too, are what are the outcomes? And from our community of Fairfield, which I think their first step is a research project to understand sort of what are the issues, what should be the priorities that are tackled by this group. So that's what I am currently looking forward to. But Cristin and Jen, if you have anything that you would like to add?
I'll let Jen go first since I've been doing more talking.
I'll just add that I do think this year in particular, the centrality of inequity and the role race plays in equity will be central to the work of many, many legislators and the policies coming out of the General Assembly. And I know specifically in education, Connecticut has the largest achievement and opportunity gap in the nation. I am certain you're aware of that. And how we continue to ensure that all children have access to a Fairfield quality education, regardless of your area code, has been something we've been working on for decades and has been slow to make gains. And I think we need input from the public on how we could better be meeting those needs. And there's certainly no silver bullet, but I do think we're in a unique opportunity right now where we're looking with a fresh set of eyes at what exactly is our reality. Cristin, I'll let you add anything that you might have.
Thank you for that question. And I just want to say to Trey and Fairfield Yabantu, I have so been appreciated and been grateful for the work that you and some of the other organizations like Rep. Devlin mentioned, the Racial Equity and Justice Task Force, but it's that we have to continue to have these conversations, and it can't just be groups like Fairfield Yabantu who are raising these. In the issues that I talked about at the outset in terms of the committee work, when I talk about the work in government administration and elections and the ability to improve access to voting, that's an issue about equity. It's an issue about race. It's an issue about economic justice. All of those things tie in for me and matter. Assuring that we are restoring voting rights for people because we know that in particular, people who've been involved with the criminal justice system are disproportionately Black and brown and people of color. When I think about transportation, I think about equity. When I think about funding and assuring that we are funding transit so that people who can't afford to have a car, again, disproportionately folks who are BIPOC are able to get where they need to go. When I think about COVID and I think about vaccine distribution and messaging in particular as to how we assure that communities of color and folks who are concerned about the vaccine, all of those things have to be part of the priority. And then finally, in planning and development, you know, when we think about how we plan for our future, we have to think about how we plan in an equitable way, how we have both diverse housing stock, but that we're addressing needs of people and ability for people, as Jen said, to have supports and services. I have for actually a while. I'll hold up. I use sticky notes, even though there's noting on the computer. I still use these, and this one is from a forum that I listened in on quite a while back, but I've kept it up on my computer. The difference in the grand list between the wealthiest community in the state, which is Greenwich, and the least wealthy property-wise, which is Union, is a $50.3 billion difference. That's an astounding number, and it impacts, it certainly impacts the value of an education a municipality can provide, but it impacts the opportunity for all residents. And all of those things have to be at the forefront of what we do, because we as a society will only succeed as much as we all succeed together.
Thank you, Cristin, and thank you, Jen. Okay, we have certainly more questions. Will the legislature address early voting and absentee balloting? Will all of the legislators on this call support it?
I can give a simple yes. I spoke with the House committee. Those items will be on the agenda this year, and I 100% support both of those.
I haven't seen the language of the bill, but I am certainly in support of making voting easier.
So I will add my point of view as well. I think that this past election process showed people where before it was voted down to expand absentee balloting, that our voting public seems to be far more ready for that. Early voting, I'll be honest, not so confident there. No excuse absentee. I think our time has come, but I say that with a caveat, and we saw this during the primaries in the last year. And that is something that, quite frankly, I have found neglected by our Secretary of State, and that is having the infrastructure in place to be able to do new ways of voting and be able to approach things differently. Frequently it's compared, well, this state does it, but they have a different infrastructure in place. So I think it's really important that those steps are taken. The Secretary of State depends in partnership with our town clerks and our registrars of voters. They need to be properly trained. They need to be properly prepared. Our voting lists need to be cleaned. There's a lot of things that need to happen, and that should be happening now and moving forward. And it hasn't happened in the past prior to our elections in 2019 or 2020, sorry. So I'm all for expanding access. No excuse absentees, absolutely. I'd really like to see some attention paid to the infrastructure so that things work smoothly.
And Rep. Devlin, if I just might add, I think that's one of the challenges of 169 towns, each doing things separately, where in many, many communities throughout the country, you're right, where we're comparing ourselves. I have recently gotten to know one of the Maricopa County elections folks out in Arizona, and we're talking about, essentially an area that has a population similar in size, a voting population similar in size to most of our state, as an elections administrator. The other issue around it is funding, and that's something that we haven't necessarily prioritized in the General Assembly. So you raised some important points with that.
And I think, yes, making it a priority out of the Secretary of State's office is really important to do. And I miss being on GAE. That was one of my favorite committees. Are there any plans to tackle, there's two questions here that are somewhat related, so I'm just going to read them both so that we have them. They're both related to housing, not planning and development, but are there any plans to tackle the looming foreclosure crisis? And another, which it is too bad that Senator Hwang isn't on the call anymore, and maybe these are also some questions that can be addressed further. through him. But if there are any plans to provide any relief for tenants at risk of eviction beyond the moratorium, and even outside of the pandemic, having an eviction filing, even one that doesn't end in eviction, can make it incredibly difficult to secure new housing. Other states have implemented systems where records are sealed unless they actually end an eviction. Is this something that the caucus would be open to pursuing? So I'm going to take a pass on that because it's not conversations that I've been part of. I don't have any updated information. I don't know, Cristin, if you do, or Jen, you have anything to add, but I'm happy to flag this to also share back because I do know it has been talked about. I just don't have the updates.
I don't have specifics either. And this is, again, one of those kind of highlights of what happens often in the legislature is you spend time focusing on the committee work of the committee you're on. And this is definitely within the purview of the Housing Committee. I will just say that I know that there have been a number of conversations, but I don't know where they stand at this point. The fact is we are going to have to address this though on some level, or we are going to see, again, I used the word catastrophic earlier. We as a state have been so committed to addressing homelessness, and certainly our Department of Housing under Governor Malloy and our previous commissioner and ongoing, we've had tremendous success. We don't want people to be on the street. It's not a humane thing. It's not safe. It's not, and also in a COVID era, more people are spreading COVID if they are homeless. It's makes it harder to contain the virus as well, but obviously from a human rights standpoint. But there's been a lot of talk among advocates, but I don't know anything more specific.
I'll just add, I happen to have been on a call earlier today, and currently what had gone into rental assistance, I think, was $40 million just from the state. And we are allotted, I think it was $126 or $127 million to go into rental assistance. And some advocates were thinking of applying that money as sort of a landlord bailout, with the rentee being the beneficiary, as long as there was a guarantee that they weren't going to evict any of their tenants with that money. But there's now a little concern that the language in the federal bill around those dollars might not allow for such a simple and straightforward spending of the money. And then one other thing I've heard from some housing advocates is that in the call to cancel rent, that actually would really hurt our small landlords. And 60% of the natural occurring affordable housing stock in Connecticut is actually small landlords who own one or two buildings. That is like their savings nest egg, or how they were able to send their children to college. And that if we allowed all of those landlords to essentially fail by canceling rent, then quite likely those affordable housing units would never come back online. So I just wanted to add that also.
No, that's good. Thanks to both of you, because it is a complex issue, and it is an issue of significance, certainly for the renter, but Jen, as you've pointed out too, for the landlord as well. So there's certainly more to come on that. I know there are discussions ongoing. It's a serious issue, no doubt. Another question that we have received is, why is the legislature not pushing for budget cuts when a huge deficit has been looming for over 6 months? It may not be an immediate deficit, but it's not too far down the road. I'll give you guys a chance to jump in on that.
Session hasn't started yet, so the work will happen, and there will be a lot of conversations. We are very, very fortunate, and I want to just thank our comptroller, Kevin Limbo. I painted my room that I usually am in for these Zooms, and so I had an opportunity to find something from my very first term in 2014. It was a presentation by the comptroller's office to help create some stability And he helped to lead the effort and is one of the reasons why we have one of the strongest rainy day funds in the country. This is definitely a rainy day, and we are very fortunate to be able to take advantage of that. But it won't solve the problem alone. So we are going to, throughout the appropriations and finance, revenue, and bonding process this session, be talking about just that, what makes sense, what needs further investment, where are we going to have to cut back, where might we need to raise additional funds. All of those things are going to have to be conversations, and that all of that in the backdrop of what kind of support are we or aren't we going to get from the federal government? Because again, back to the conversation around housing, some of the issues that we're facing, some of the small business issues that we're facing, our restaurants in Fairfield, such a vibrant part of our community, federal funds are going to be needed to help us supplement what we do to support our communities.
I'll just add the perspective as someone who has not been sworn in yet, and so has not been working in the Capitol. We all have already been given the notice that if what you hope to do here has a fiscal note, it is not likely happening. So there is very, very much a concern about how the government spends our dollars, and understanding the very serious state of Connecticut's fiscal standing. And just for context, 50% of the state operating budget is fixed costs, and a third is debt services and unfunded pension liabilities. So that is frustrating. We're running a state on 70% of a budget by and large, and to think about either the savings or the additional supports we could have with that other 30%, not to say we wouldn't have some outstanding debt services in a more traditional state budget, but it's tough. And so to find really meaningful savings is often really big ticket items that are wildly unpopular to cut. And I'll just say that.
No, thank you both for those perspectives. What I would add are a couple of things, to what Cristin talked about in terms of the rainy day fund, establishing the spending cap and the borrowing cap and the volatility cap, which were key tenets of the bipartisan budget that we really fought hard to ensure that they were retained out of the Republican budget that had passed and was vetoed. That has really enabled us to create a rainy day fund for the first time, rather than just keep spending money that would come in. And I think one of the challenges that we'll have as a legislature is to stop reaching for solutions that rely on creating bigger government and new agencies and government administration of programs that could be done from the private sector. So our economy was not in good shape pre-COVID. And it certainly is hurting, as most are, given the pandemic and the crisis that we've been dealing with. But all that we can do, I think, to encourage job creators to come to stay and grow, and to take the tax burden off of, really, it's our middle class family budgets that are getting squeezed more and more. So those are going to be some of the big challenges. There are huge fixed costs, as Jen mentioned, and our unfunded liabilities. But I think going forward, if we can seek solutions that aren't going to continue to enlarge our government and government run programs versus private sector, would be one way to move ahead.
Laura, can I just build on that for
Sure.
one moment? I think one of the things we have to do is to more effectively use data to make decisions, and to understand what works and what doesn't. And I think, I'm thinking as you're talking, Laura, one thing that I have been working on and advocating for is GIS and the use of GIS data and information at the state level, which will actually require some additional resources. However, it has the potential to save significant funds, but not necessarily from the state budget, from the municipality's budget. So sometimes that happens when we're looking, we are charged with the state budget. and our first select woman and mayors around the state are charged with the local budgets. And we have to make sure that we're looking at that from a big picture standpoint in terms of, you know, and making sure that if we are doing something like that, that it will in fact save money for our municipalities.
Good point. Thank you, Cristin. We are coming up on 5 o'clock. I have one more question here. So let me throw this one out to you guys. Understanding we don't currently have a rep on higher ed, but have you heard of efforts toward understanding the lessons learned from first semester successful or challenged for the upcoming semester around COVID?
Should I start?
Sure.
I am more than happy to reach out actually to the new House Chair actually of higher education. I can only speak to a recent conversation that we had with Sacred Heart University. And I would say as legislators, they kind of briefed us and gave some specific examples of some of the lessons that were learned and some different things that are being put into practice for the next semester. But otherwise, in terms of how the committee, for example, is looking to handle that through legislation, I am not certain.
And I don't believe Tony is serving on higher ed this time, but I haven't had a briefing recently, and Cristin, I don't know if you have or Jen in terms of Fairfield U, but Sacred Heart does reach out quite regularly where we all come together and they try to keep us very informed, certainly so we can help them in any way, but it also, of course, they impact our community. And they have been really strict and stringent in terms of the, testing that's been underway. I think one of the challenges that all of the universities are going to face is whether, to what extent kids will choose to come back and to what extent they can come back. And by that, what I'm alluding to is the, room and board financials that really also help sustain the universities. So more to come with higher ed. What I would ask from our administrator, Kat, is to flag that along with the question regarding the apartments, evictions and support for landlords as well. And we can circle back on both of those. At this point, I don't have any additional questions. Let me just scan real quick and make sure that I haven't missed any. Oh, there was one, which is what is the status of bills that were stalled in the 2020 legislative session? I can say, some of those will likely reemerge. Two were the aircraft carriers, a term probably not well understood, but pretty massive bills for the Department of Transportation and the Department of Motor Vehicles. Those will move ahead in this session. They may change to some extent based on new information and maybe differing priorities. Cristin, anything that you would like to add to that as well?
I would just say specifically, every bill dies when the session ends. So any bill that's, quote, resurrected actually has to go back through the process fully.
Yes.
So specifically because of the fact that our nonpartisan staff who actually write the bills, I know we legislators like to say we write the bills. We don't actually write them. The lawyers who are the nonpartisan staff write the bills, but they are going to have to draft them. So the bills that are already drafted, or for example, were voted out of committee last session, those are likely to be prioritized just from a practical standpoint if a committee is wanting to continue with that. So I think as Rep. Devlin mentioned, those bills, for example, that help agencies run, or some of those issues that were ongoing issues, those are the ones that are likely to get priority.
Yeah, very good. And thank you for raising the process, because just so that you're aware, and again, you have the CGA website to see what is forthcoming. You can reach out to any of us at any time. But committees are currently gearing up despite the fact that opening day isn't until Wednesday. The bill deadline is the 3rd week of this January for all bills to be submitted. I think there is an emphasis to also have fewer bills this session simply because of the way in which we will be working. But bills are then vetted through the committee. Any bill that kind of makes it through its screening process would have a public hearing before it is voted out of a committee. And then it would be on its way to the House or Senate floor. So we look forward to your ongoing engagement with us. I hope that you have found this helpful. Cristin, and then Jen, I'll turn it to you for some closing comments before a final goodbye.
I just want to say thank you again to Rep. Devlin for putting this together, and for everyone who joined us. My email address is Cristin.McCarthyVahey, and then we're all at cga.ct.gov. But I often tell folks, please call me on my cell phone, which is 203-522-3037. And you can reach out to me. I'll say it again, 522-3037. That is always the best way to reach me directly, and I'm happy to talk with you. Thank you so much, Laura.
Thanks, Cristin. Jen?
Thanks, Laura, for having me. And I wish I had more institutional knowledge, but I am so excited to at least virtually get up there to Hartford and serve this community. And I hope you will all be in touch. I know there is a tremendous amount of work ahead of us and so many priorities. So my email, even though I am Jen here, my email is jennifer.leeper, again, at cga.ct.gov. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you again, Laura.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, on behalf of all of us, and I know I speak for Senator Hwang as well, it is an honor to have the opportunity to represent our community. And in that, we represent you. So please do reach out. You can sign up for our emails at our various websites through Facebook. And please, we look forward to continued engagement. So I wish everybody a happy new year. And we'll be off and running to the new session. So thanks so much for taking your time to be with us today.